It's now time for this month's broadcast of Learning Now TV.
It's the 11th of June, and welcome to our first June programme. We've been working hard, and I think you're going to enjoy it. So, Kate, what have we got in store for us today?
Well, we've been busy in lockdown. It's not stopping us. We have talked to the likes of Simon Gibson, who has had a long career in L&D, some great stuff in there. Dr. Hannah Gore shares some thoughts about learning design for the new normal. And Serena Gonzalez-Fursh talks to Nigel about her doctorate, among other things.
Indeed, indeed. So, enjoy the show.
So I'm thrilled to welcome our next guest to Learning Now Television. Dr. Hannah Gore has been in learning and development for around about 20 years. I know she doesn't look it. About 15 of them have been around online and blended. She's got a track record with the OU, setting up things like Future Learn, which have obviously gone on to be global successes, and recently set up a global business school and is now a learning experience consultant. Hannah, thank you for joining us today.
Okay, thanks for inviting me.
It's my absolute pleasure. Now, at the moment, you're talking to different companies about some of the things that they're doing against the backdrop of the COVID-19 situation, etc. But how do you what's your kind of take on it all? Because there's been this sort of initial drive to, everybody's got to work from home and we've got to set everything up. But you coined this great phrase when we were talking before around the new normal. So do you think we're in a bit of a transitionary phase at the moment of this pandemic?
Yeah, so when the pandemic hit, when the lockdown happened, when everybody realised they had to work from home, there was the obvious knee-jerk reaction of, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? How are we going to get everything online? And there was a sudden upsurge of chucking things up online, and a lot of it is things like PowerPoint in SharePoint. That is not online learning, that's stuff online. They're two very different things. It's an insult to my craft otherwise. But so we had that knee-jerk reaction, and now we're realizing we're going to be in this situation for quite some time. This is not a sickness bug that passes in a week. We're looking at this for months, potentially years. And then we're going to have this new normal. We're not going to go back to January 2020. It no longer exists. So we could be working shifts. We could be working some days from home, some days in the office, to stagger people on public transport and in office buildings for quite some time until we're vaccinated or the virus dies out. So then the question then comes, so now what do we do? Say we've chucked everything up online, say we put it all in SharePoint, we've turned everything that was a workshop into some situation that they can learn online. Doesn't necessarily make it successful. And we have to think about the long term, because companies now are changing very, very rapidly. There are companies now that are making products that they weren't making before. You know, we see companies like Brewdog who have gone from making alcohol to making hand sanitizer.
Great
We're
example,
seeing
yeah.
Companies that used to do 3D printing for one thing now make PPE. And so Zara, for example, all their factories in Spain now make PPE for their doctors and nurses. So this world has suddenly moved, and we need to be able to train our staff effectively in it. And it's not just training to do their job, it's training them in pastoral care. Because right now we're all sitting at home, and some of us, like myself, are used to traveling and working from home. I'm used to this environment. This is my home office. I know how to do this.
Same.
And it took a mental adjustment. I didn't have to do this in a pandemic in a very short period of time. And now there's the pastoral care element. It's you know, we spend all our time teaching people how to be empowered, how to become great leaders, but we don't know how to teach them yet how to respond to this situation with their staff, how to keep them engaged, how to ask them if they're truly okay, because so many staff who are afraid of being made redundant or being furloughed, they daren't say that they're not okay. And so we've got stressful situations happening at home. So we need to have this new normal as to what this next phase looks like, as to now we've got everything shoved up there, shouldn't we start looking at designing it in a different way to be more effective with a different suite of courses, content, videos, etc. than before? Are we seeing, for example, CEOs doing video briefings for their staff, you know, more regularly? It's something we did a lot at the Open University. And then comes the phase of, well, when the bar gets lifted and we're allowed to start integrating more workplace-wise, then what? So it's actually 3 stages to this new normal that we have to design differently each stage.
Well, one of the things I love about your work, you know, previously you've done a lot of the flipped classroom model. I love how you sort of attack a problem. You know, you've kind of got that design brain. How do you think that some of our viewers, some of the L&D professionals out there could start to break this down, unpack this, and really sort of tackle this next, because like you say, it's sort of almost incremental phases. So, you know, how do you sort of even start to break that down and think about that in terms of the design when you've kind of probably got this just glut of stuff, as you say?
Yes. Yeah. First of all, I think the thing is yes, there's the stuff there, but look at what you need next. So it doesn't matter if you've got a warehouse full of stuff sitting online, half of it could be made redundant. And it's about, where is the direction of my company going? Where do we see our company in 6, 9, 12 months, 2 years' time? That's what we should be aiming on training. Everything else that went before, some of it just can't be reused, and we just have to go, oh well. You know, it's the same as, you know, when we did training in the olden days face-to-face with systems that no longer exist. Oh well, things move on, you can't get precious about it. But see where the company now wants to go, see what their plans are, and talk to business managers, and people are rewriting their 5-year strategies a hell of a lot quicker and a lot shorter now than before. And look where you can be taking your company, and not going, okay, I need to reversion everything that we had previously, because that's just not going to work. And see where that is going, attack that online first. So how I need to develop an online piece of content now purely for online. How do I then develop it to become engaging with, say, practice-based learning sitting around it? So they're not just passively learning, you're not just giving a webinar, and you're just not shoving them a load of videos, that they actually have activities to do, that they're actually building something.
Yeah, I always love that. Well, like with your salespeople in your previous role, can you give us some examples about sort of how some of the activities that you got people to do even before they maybe looked at the online training, or certainly got to a classroom, like you say, you know, pre-COVID?
Pre-days. Yes, the best example I always give is one about presentation skills. This is the one that I think everyone can visualize the most, because I think at some point all of us have sat in a room and had someone present to us about how to present, and it's normally a PowerPoint presentation with some words on it, usually bullet points and some clip art or a little bit of iStock photography, and that is standard. And you sit there and you doodle in your handout, and you're kind of listening but you're really not, and then you go back to your office, put it in the drawer, forget about it. But that, everyone, I think, pretty much in the world that's ever been in an office-based environment has gone through that kind of training. Me, many times. And it's utterly useless, because when the boss then comes along and says, I need you to go give a presentation, you're there going, oh, and you get out your PowerPoints and you look at your little doodles that you've made, and some of them are quite creative and some of them could do some work. And then you look at the notes and you think, I don't remember anything. And you cobble together a presentation, you present, and your boss is looking at you going, I thought you went on training. Like, I put you in a room for half a day to a day. Why aren't you cured? It doesn't work that way. There is no magic pill to learning. And so with Solera, all the courses were flipped classroom methodology. So we taught them online first via a course about the science of presenting, the art of building a storyboard, the art of a narrative through a presentation, the types of imagery that is used, the story, the actual physical story you're going to tell, how to record yourself and watch yourself back. So you can see the little tics and movements. I gesticulate a lot. Anyone who goes to my presentations knows that for a fact. And I usually make a joke about it halfway through, at least at the beginning. And to understand how to do the science of it, and they build their presentation as they're doing the course. So they're actually starting to craft something instead of passively being told something. It's more active-based learning. They then present it to their boss, because their boss should know how they're presenting to a client. 100%. It's not good enough these days to go, I don't know why they didn't get that pitch. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. And it's frustrating for me as an L&D person that every single year is the only time they ever talk about personal development in your appraisal, because there's a section of it in your appraisal. And it's always right down at the bottom. And they're going, okay, we want you to achieve all these things. By the way, what are you going to do about developing yourself? And there's what, 1, 2, maybe 3 bullet points you're allowed to fill in. And they're telling you to achieve all of this, but how are you going to do it? Why isn't that box at the top? How do we develop you so you can do all these objectives? Why are we always an afterthought?
So do you think that there's, and this is something that we've been talking to people quite a lot about on Learning Now TV, do you think then that there is an opportunity for learning and development now as a function, as a profession, to stand up and say, look, we can help you with the business pivot that we are going through. We can help, you know, not just survive, but maybe even thrive in whatever.
Absolutely, because I've always said it, that good L&D can make a company and bad L&D can break a company. And we are so powerful, yet too nice for our own good all the time. And we are at this point where we can wipe the slate clean, that we can say, this was pre-apocalypse, it doesn't count anymore. We've got a new world that we're entering into. We can do it a new way. And flipped classroom could be that, because, for example, with the presentation, they present to their boss sees how they're presenting. If they pass, they go through to the classroom environment. That was either a webinar or face-to-face. And they're coming through the door knowing the science of how to present with an actual presentation, which makes the job of the facilitator not easier, but actually more in depth, because they've got something to work with. And then they're practicing it, they're seeing how other people present, the types of ways that they've addressed their narrative. But, you know, if you're in a classroom with 20 people, you're seeing 20 different ways to give a presentation.
What's the kind of the one piece of advice you might give to people now that maybe the dust has settled and they are looking ahead to this new normal?
Yeah, I would say start talking to all the managers, various different levels inside the company, as to finding out what are now their new goals, what is their strategy, how are they going to be engineering their teams for the future, and then working out how to pitch yourself in that experience. Because we can't be the nice to have, oh yes, maybe we should actually train someone. We should be more active, more responsive, and going, okay, this is how I can help you. I can see now that this is happening. We're doing this strategy. We're expanding this project. We're trying to put in shift patterns. I understand you've got some problems within your team as regards to stress levels. This is how I can help. And we should be there more as a result, and not waiting to be asked, because if we wait to ask, we will not be successful. It'll be too late.
Dr. Hannah Gore, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Kate.
If I had £1 for every time that somebody has mentioned the Netflix of learning to me about their learning system, I'd be a rich woman. And well, if it wasn't for lockdown, I might be on an island somewhere in the sun. Robin Hoyle, this month blows apart all the hype around the learning experience platform. Check it out.
Over the last few weeks, a number of my clients who are struggling to adapt what they do from a learning and development perspective in response to lockdown, COVID-19 and all of that all of us are, I'm sure, more than familiar with, have said to me, is there anything you can do with our learning experience platform? So can we integrate the material, the content, the learning experiences that we are hoping to create for them within their existing platforms and systems? And so I've been doing a bit of investigation around the different platforms to see what's available, to see how they work, to see what we could do to integrate what we do. And everywhere that I've turned, I've seen these learning experience platforms described as the Netflix of learning. And that analogy started to make me feel uneasy the more time I came across it. And I did come across it a lot because these organizations that create these platforms are not the most imaginative when they're coming up with metaphors to describe what it is that they do. So I was constantly coming across something and thinking, why is it that this doesn't feel right? Why doesn't it sit well with me? I know it's there as an analogy. I know it's there to help people understand what it is that you get. You get a vast library of content which you can add to, and you get a mechanism for making recommendations to the users, usually driven by some form of AI, and usually based on your profile, which gets compared to other people with a similar profile and which is added to and amended as you use the system more and more. Okay, I get it. But it still didn't feel like the right analogy for me, and that's because Netflix is a consumer platform. And by a consumer platform, it gives people things easily. It gives easy access to stuff which is just there as televisual wallpaper. It's not something which you necessarily need to engage with or commit to or invest time and effort in. It is just people like you also watched programs like this. So regardless of whether or not your profile is bang on and absolutely gives you what you want, or your profile is somewhat off where it should be and you're getting served all sorts of extraneous stuff, the fact is it's saying here's a vast amount of choice, but rather than you doing the effort to find what it is that you want, what it is that will be useful for you, we're going to take all of that effort away. And I guess at its heart, that's what makes me feel uncomfortable about that analogy. Because learning shouldn't be about taking effort away. It should be about expecting people to give effort. Learning shouldn't be about giving people things which is predictable, which is exactly what they would expect that we know that they're going to like. It should be about challenging people and giving them things which takes them to places they would never on their own got to. And yet we've got this analogy which is just serving things up to people. And it reminded me of some of the other analogies that I've spoken about and written about before. So when social learning first came on the scene, everybody was talking about how disruptive it was going to be, and that it was like the sharing economy, and the sharing economy was like Airbnb and like Uber. So we've got a mechanism where legitimate businesses are destroyed by people who are avoiding some of the normal regulations, taxes, employment responsibilities of those legitimate businesses, and are therefore able to undercut them. That didn't feel like something that we should be aspiring to within the world of learning and development. And so I had some anxieties and concerns about those analogies, and Netflix is no different. And it's no different particularly because I think learning should be a little bit difficult. It should be hard for people. They should have to commit to and make an effort to find what it is that they need, to plot their own route through a vast array of learning resources. And a bit like when I first started out in distance learning many, many moons ago, lots of organisations had libraries of content then. And I used to joke with the people who were in charge of them to say, well, you've got a fantastic library of content here. Next time I come along, I'll bring a duster, shall I? Because nobody ever used them. Because it was just there, it was just lots of stuff. And the reason that nobody ever used the lots of stuff was it was generic. It wasn't about them, it wasn't about their organisation, wasn't about their aspirations, wasn't about what it is that they need to do next. And I'm struggling from what I've seen so far of these learning experience platforms to see what the difference is, apart from the fact that it's now online and will take all of the issue of choice out of the way for you. So there's no curiosity at its heart. It's not about discovery, and it's all about it being simple. Well, learning isn't simple. Learning should be a little bit hard. And the problem with some of these platforms is that their avowed intent is to make it easy for people. Maybe they're making it a bit too easy for it to have any real impact.
DPG's online courses are designed to fit around your life, so you can study anytime, anywhere. Get in touch now for more info.
I'm really excited to be talking to Serena Gonçalves-Fersh this morning. Serena is a talent manager, a head of L&D, with all that industrial experience, but she's also doing a doctorate at the University of Middlesex related to her practice. So my obvious first question to you, Serena, is what is the link? What is the bridge between your work on the one hand and your research on the other hand?
Thank you for having me, Nigel.
Pleasure.
I'm very, very honored that, to be included in this conversation. I've been in L&D for 20 years now. I'm pretty much started as everybody did in instructional design, facilitation. I've implemented learning management systems, led learning functions, and somewhere down the line, a few years ago, I was noticed a huge change in the industry. We've got more companies being formed, growing, accelerating, merging, being acquired, acquiring, and even folding that at a more rapid pace than ever before. And at the same time, we've got a lot of companies that, or most of these companies happen to be in technology. And while all this acceleration is happening with 5 generations of workforce coming in, Gene Meister's book, we still have fundamentally and principally the same approaches to doing learning and development. I took issue with, the future of the world is technology, so the future of learning is learning technology. I noticed that the remit of the learning function, our structures, and what we were putting out and how we were approaching it didn't fundamentally seem to change. And I was worried that with more and more knowledge being free, MOOCs and YouTube and TED Talks and Coursera and everything else, edX out there, what was the value that a learning person and a learning function brings in?
And is that the research? Is that the function of the research, to get at that value? Yeah.
What is the value that L&D is bringing to the table in accelerating organizations in technology, or organizations that are being changed through huge digital transformation?
That's a really important question, Serena, a really important question. So, and has coronavirus and the pandemic and the different ways of working reinforced your ideas, or has it changed and challenged your ideas?
So I see 3 possible outcomes from this. So one, there is this initial burst of us going, move everything to digital and online, and let's take the 8 hours of pointless things we do and now do 8 1-hour things of pointless things we do, except do it online. And I think there might be a huge burst of that initially, but then everybody stopped flying for a year after 9/11, and then everything went back again. We'll just go back to how things already were. I think there's a huge impact on this year will be a year of, maybe even if it's not as far as recession, though it might already be starting, the bottom lines are going to be affected of companies, and they will have to look at what's non-essential. And we really have to think about whether L&D is going to be seen as non-essential at least in the short term.
And we're seeing it. We're seeing as well. We're seeing some companies really getting behind L&D and saying you're part of the solution and part of the future. But we're equally, I think, seeing companies who are saying we don't need you. You know, give them degree, give them TEDx. They can get on and do it themselves. We don't actually need this structure here. So they're kind of answering your question in a very negative way for you.
Exactly. And also from that same discussion comes, you know, we've been harping about virtual and e-learning and doing things remotely for ages. And now if you're looking, you'd never want the choice of your pedagogy to be purely cost driven, but it will be if cost is now a factor in your organization. So yes, there will be more things moving online, whether it's facilitator led or not. There is the third aspect, which I don't want to lose, which is when you ask people what are the things they're going to do when lockdown ends, and some people are doing it even before lockdown has ended, and they say, I want to go on a holiday, I want to go to a restaurant with friends, and I want to go and hug people that I've missed. And if you extrapolate the same thing to organizations, it's like, I want to travel to that office, I want to put my hand out and shake the hand of this person that I've only built a relationship with virtually, and I want to do things in groups, the restaurant or the classroom, or so there is that aspect where people will be hungry for human contact again, and we need to think about how we will balance the cost challenges with the best way to deliver learning that adds business value, because if it's not adding business value, it'll have to go in a non-essential world. With the individual needs, how will people come out of isolation? How will people come out of quarantine? Some might even like it there. You know, it's my husband, who's an introvert, calls it paradise, because now nobody's even asking him to go into the office. But there are people who it'll be different. For some, it'll be almost a Stockholm syndrome. For some people, it will be chomping at the bit. So I think human behavior over the next few months is important for us to take a look at.
I agree. So give me some tips from your research, from your experience, from your observations. If I were running an L&D operation now, what would you tell me I should be thinking about for the next 6 months?
So these are early stages. I want to caveat by saying that
that's okay. That's okay.
We have 18 months or so of this to go. But very strongly speaking, I think the days are gone where L&D was an event. Yeah. It sat separately. You know, it had its LMS, it had its platform, it had its trainers, and it sat separately from the daily workings of people. And you know, Burson has said that, but there are years before, from Senge's time, they're talking about learning in the flow of work and learning in a disruptive world and learning as part, but it never actually truly happened. We've always been this function. To a large extent, I think we were also used as something that you could say as a tick box, as a retention thing. Yeah. Yes, we do have an L&D function that develops our people. Yeah. I think that's one huge element, that it will stop being
not an event, right? Number one. Number two.
The second thing is, I think if you're not relating it to the bottom line value of the business, if your metrics are still happy
internal, people like it. Oh, 60% of people accessed it. It's what is the impact on the organization? Yeah,
if your metrics are still happy sheets and bottoms on seats, and hours on this thing, that's actually a failure. It's not a success. Because the businesses will start thinking more about the opportunity cost of people going away from their clients and their day job. So everything has to be business performance, business values, business objectives and outcomes. And if learning is not measured against that, and then of course you bring in the element of performance, both business and individual, then it won't have a business case to exist anymore. So
true. Number three, give me a third one.
The distance from need and application. So that it ties in a little bit to what I was saying, and my wonderful thesis advisor calls it the two faces of Janus metaphor.
Yes.
You know, there's the L&D for your innovation and your creativity, something you need to take, go away, spend time on critical reflection to absorb and to progress. But there's learning that's needed for your business as usual. And that would include things like if you're in technology, the certifications you need
In compliance areas.
Compliance and all of that stuff. But it also is, I need to perform a task. I need a reminder on how to do it. Right now, if you ask somebody how do they get that, they're going to tell you Google or the guy sitting next to them. I don't think anybody says the LMS. You know, I don't know something, I go to the LMS. And I think that's another thing that's going to change. We have to be seen reducing time to competency, influencing business as usual as quickly as possible, helping people do their jobs better and therefore perform better. So it comes back again to, you know, performance consulting. But I think that's my...
Three really good tips. And what you're also saying, which is incredibly important, is that this isn't a one-shot game. There isn't one solution. There's not one mode. There's not one thing you're doing. You're doing a whole bunch of things, but very firmly with the needs of the organization, the needs of the business in mind, and with impact as your only criteria for success. I think that's fantastically helpful, and good luck with the research, Serena. I really hope it's going to be a wonderful doctorate that we will all learn more about as you get closer to drawing some firm conclusions. Good luck with everything. Good luck with the role. And it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Serena Gonzalez-Fish, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Nigel.
Our learning experiences unlock potential, transform the performance of people and organisations, and help millions around the world build happy and successful careers. We change lives with evidence-based learning that works, sparking real change for real impact.
The Charity Learning Consortium have taken us on a journey to Shelter and Chris Medlang. Chris is going to talk about his role and what he thinks L&D contributes to that very important organisation.
This month on Learning Now TV, we are talking to Chris Medlang. Chris is with Shelter, a wonderful charity where he is the L&D officer, but he is in the learning and organisational development team. Now, this is very unusual that we have somebody who's actually got OD in their title. When it comes to the third sector, it's not that usual that you think about OD, but in the corporate sector, how often are you thinking about OD? There's a real crossover where actually they're not the same, they are different, and perhaps Chris can help us out with a bit of a definition of what OD is. Let's have a look. So Chris, organisation development in the third sector, a very unusual situation. Can you talk us through how Shelter came to the conclusion that that was needed?
Yeah, sure. So I think that it was, as opposed to the organization saying we want to start doing OD, it was more that a lot of work was going on in the organization, a lot of introspective work, such as an engagement survey. We've done culture web sort of focus groups to look at what sort of culture we have. And just, we have a new strategy. So there was all this sort of new work that was going on, a lot of introspection about understanding what we do. And the L&D team, or formerly L&D, now L&OD team, basically have carved out a role in supporting all this ambitious change that's happening in the organization, which has been about the way we lead, the way we conduct performance management, the way we interact across directorates and things like that. So it's been a shift from the sort of traditional transactional learning intervention, curating e-learning courses, checking compliance, to facilitating conversations, running forums, linking people that had not been linked, that should be linked in order to improve and enable one another. So it was more about seeing an opportunity and seizing it that the L&OD team have done, our business partners who are embedded in the organization, and the head of L&OD who wanted to basically raise our profile because we have a lot more to offer than that transactional sort of work.
Okay, so in a definition of organisational development for Shelter is about moving away from transactional. Talk me through, how do you define what OD is? Because this is the problem, isn't it? With organisational development, everyone has a different definition.
Yeah.
Everyone has a different understanding of what actually that work is. So for our audience on Learning Now TV, you know, L&D practitioners in, you know, corporate roles, how can they understand, well, what is this shift? If you're just, you know, describing better conversations, why is that OD?
I think that the big key difference is that it implies change, that you're bringing change, meaningful, relevant, and wanted change. That's the difference, I would say, because if you carry on with the sort of more transactional, there's the risk of things staying the same. If you measure success by how compliant you are, something like that, then there's no real urge or need to change because you're just concerned about mitigating risk or whatever you're doing. So I would say that is the key difference, is that an organization is like an organism. The context within which it works, so for us that would be the housing crisis, is changing. Legislation changes. The nature of the struggle that our clients go through changes. So we therefore have to change constantly. And that's what OD does, is it enables an organization to change and to do it in a deliberate way, and do it in a way where you kind of leverage whatever's available, whatever opportunities are available, whatever that's a novel offer that you're able to put out, or whether that's funding, contracts you're able to achieve. For us, that's quite important. So it's putting us in a position to not react to change, but to sort of capitalize on them.
So there's a real acknowledgement that something's shifting every day in the wider work, and how you are prepared to move that forward. So one thing that I'm aware that you have done at Shelter, which is quite unusual for the third sector, is marry together your volunteer network with your staff network with regards to L&D. Now, often in third sectors, those two things are quite separate, and certainly my own experience in Girl Guiding, we have to, you know, staff learning is not the same as volunteer learning. And I've long admired the way that you've done that sort of married those things together. What I'm hearing from you today with regards to the OD piece is that was just a natural part of a progression. When you look at change, when you look at preparedness and readiness for the future, those workforces bringing them together. From our corporate viewers, I'm wondering if we can have a little bit more from you around how do you get around those silos? Because that's one of the biggest problems in a corporate world, isn't it? That you know, you work in HR and you never speak to finance, you never speak to operations, and you're all doing your separate things. You may even have different learning pathways. How do you bring those things together, and how does OD help you to do that?
This is an ongoing piece of work that we're currently invested in, and we're doing a lot of work around about breaking down these silos. I think one thing that I've seen has been key is that it can't be sort of dictated from a certain team, a central team, especially like in Shelter, where the L&OD team potentially to some people is seen as that's a head office thing, that's a central services thing, and they're just telling us something and it doesn't really resonate and it doesn't really have any energy or momentum to carry it forward. So co-production of whatever the new ways of working, whatever the interventions are, all of the people that we're trying to support, all of our clients who are our colleagues, they are the experts in what they do, what they can deliver, and also what they need. And that's the same with relationships. So we're two things at Shelter. Publicly, I guess you could describe us as we provide services, so helping individuals who are struggling with bad housing or homelessness. And we're a campaign organization. And these are our two sort of main areas of effort in fighting in the housing crisis. these two groups have so much to gain from one another in terms of just knowledge and expertise and sort of learning to be shared. And so for us, it's to recognize where that knowledge exists and make the connection with where it can have the most impact and enable another part. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, did I answer your question? Because
no, you totally did. What I'm hearing there is that you've got this sense of you as the facilitators for those great conversations that you talked about earlier, where you've got knowledge in one space and knowledge in another space. And OD, looking at your organisation through the OD lens means that you're seeing, you know, if I do some good work over here, how will I explode something over there? But no, let's bring those things together. Let's make sure that the whole organisation develops, not necessarily just one silo or one manager who wants to develop their team. It's just a little bit more connected.
Absolutely. And the dream is that it becomes, and it is increasingly, but that it becomes regular. Because we're probably still in the middle of that transition where it's a novelty when it happens, and people are very proud, as they should be, that look at this co-production, look at this collaboration we've done, and we do want to shout about it. The next step is that it's embedded so that it's normal and it's expected, and it doesn't really need us anymore.
What a great place to be when you've so embedded that mindset, and OD I think is a mindset in amongst everybody that you're out of a job. Well, I hope for you it's not too soon, but at some point it will happen. So we've heard today from Chris about how OD has really supported Shelter, and I think that if you consider an organisational development mindset in your organisation, perhaps it can help you as well. Until next time on Learning Now TV, thanks very much.
In the L&D world, we all know our biggest challenge is knowledge fade and demonstrating ROI from our training interventions. At Elephants Don't Forget, we use artificial intelligence to guarantee that what you train your employees, they learn and retain. If you are looking to transform the impact your training content has in your business, improve the ROI, and perhaps help employees learn and retain even the dull regulatory material, drop me a line at nelly@elephantsdon'tforget.com.
So I often say that I am delighted to welcome our next guest onto Learning Now Television, but I really, really extra mean it this time. Simon Gibson, we've known each other for a long time. Simon is an L&D. I haven't cleared this with him, but I'm going to call him a fixer. If that's not doing you a disservice. So obviously there's a lot going on in the world at the moment, but I think some of the stuff that I wanted to touch on initially was around your kind of experience. We talked a bit about this off camera and how you've kind of got to the position that you've got to and doing what you do. So you kind of will go in, look at organisations with these multi-million pound L&D budgets, these big projects, lots of things going on, and very, very quickly you're able to see around the outcomes and the impact that some of that L&D activity is or isn't generating. So I know that's a bit of a vague question, but I was hoping you could unpack some of that for us today.
Yeah, cool, thank you. Yeah, look, I'm interested and fascinated about making a difference and making an impact, not just personally, but for our profession. And you know, commercially, I think we have to, when I say we, I mean our profession, has to be strong to stand behind the impact that we're having, and not just output for output's sake, but more about outcomes, right? So I've always found a way to go and prod and poke around an organisation, so to speak, to find the people, to find the things or the problems that they feel need addressing, or they think they need addressing, or as a view, I've gone, I think this is a problem. Let's go have a look at this, and started to prod and poke. At no point do I start talking about what we can do, what I'm going to do to fix that, to address that. It's more about finding those issues first off if that makes sense.
And you know, I know that you do a lot of this. You just go in somewhere and you have a lot of conversations and you find senior stakeholders. And we talked about sort of breaking out of the L&D bubble. So, you know, you go in somewhere and kind of look at the L&D layout, but then I'm aware that you'll kind of go and buy the head of IT a coffee and things. How do you sort of get those conversations moving and quite quickly a lot of the time?
Yeah, so what we talked about off camera obviously was that L&D bubble around. Well, it's quite easy to say this is our L&D budget, this is the amount of people, this is what we're spending it on, and I suppose a bit of experience, a bit of insight, a bit of external insight will say, well, how does that compare, right? You can do a quick compare and contrast first off. You can overlay that with what is the business talking about, what is the business trying to do. But I've always found it interesting that says, you know, who else should I be going to talk to? What else is an issue? Who else is making noise? It doesn't, I'm not being hierarchical. Sorry, I'm not being hierarchical. It's just go and find those people that are going to give you honest insight. And guess what? Buy them a coffee or have a virtual chat or talk to people in their teams. And very cliched, just walk a mile in their shoes as quickly and as smartly as you can. Because then when you are talking to the senior stakeholders, sometimes I've seen a bit of a disconnect, right? You know, we think this is what's going on in our world, and I'm like, this is not what's going on in your world, right? and be brave to share that back around why that is or isn't an issue. And then you can start to talk about, and what could we do that will address that or is appropriate to address that.
And, you know, so commercially, you've always been able to almost prove, in inverted commas, the value of what you do. And at Fosway, you know, we talk a lot about the impact of learning and the fact that, you know, latest stats is about 15% of organisations are even trying to prove the impact of what they're doing. And we'll touch on the COVID stuff in just a minute, but obviously now maybe that's more important than ever. How do you go about looking at the alignment between what L&D is doing and what the business wants to do?
Yeah, there's an interesting balance, isn't there, between what we should be judgmental there, what we could be doing as a function, right, and what the business expects of the function to be doing. You know, lots of talk at the moment about value-added activity and is it a critical business function or a critical cost? I suppose, to me, that can go one of two ways. You can prove your value in what you're doing, drives and helps improve, enhance, sell more things, make people better. Commercially, you're making an impact on your organisation, and you can show that in a way that is quite easy to understand and demonstrate. We need skill X. We don't have skill X. It costs Y to go and get skill X in the market, or we could upskill these people. Do we know who those people are? You know, you can follow it through quite quickly. But there's a balance. There's a bit of what did David, I've heard David talk about it before. It's like keeping the conspiracy going, right? We've always done good things. You know, we like your things. You tell people about my good things. I'll sell more good things to other people. That's the bit you got to break, right? Because there might be a business expectation that you do these good things, but that isn't going to drive business productivity, outcome, towards the strategy, past the strategy, energy, commitment. And that's a difficult one to kind of undo, probably first off.
So I think there's something for me in there about being brave. You know, we talked a bit about off camera about something that you did within the first 2 weeks where you went into a board meeting with the CEO, the people director. You know, you just talked about breaking a cycle then. How important is it for L&D to be brave and be bold and not be afraid to shy away from some of these conversations?
Yeah, look, I own my own. I'm comfortable in my own skin, right? And those that will watch this or listen to this or will comment will know I'm quite happy to share and talk about any experiences quite openly. Now more than ever, we have to be able to stand up and be strong and be brave and honest and vulnerable as well. There's a bit of a paradigm, right, that says, look, I don't have all the answers. I've never said I have all the answers. All I've ever been able to say is, this is the issue. This is the real issue. This is what we might be able to do. Here's some options. They may have never heard that before in that way, right? And this, what a great opportunity to say, here's how I think I can help this organisation recover, move forward. We talked about the next phase, right? If we get out of this kind of crisis phase, I don't mean to be disrespectful to anybody, but to come out of this into something else, great, right? How positive is that? But that's a brave, scary conversation, I think, for many.
And how do you see this unfolding now? Obviously, we are in this kind of crisis phase. There's been a lot of talk about what L&D should be doing sort of straight off the bat. But, you know, in terms of developing those skills and capabilities that organisations need for whatever the next phase is, what's your stance on that? Is it an opportunity for L&D?
Yeah, look, great. I think it's a massive, massive opportunity, isn't it, to step into the next cycle of planning, whatever that is, short to medium term, let's say 3, 6, 9 months, that can really energise, reboot, propel your organisation to something that maybe it wasn't before, or faster than it wasn't before. There's going to be something about speed. Because if not, I am nervous and I feel you're just going to be left behind. You're a cost on a sheet, right? You're going to be left behind. And that's not a smart place to be. And I'm always half full, right? So I'm saying great opportunity. We need more skills. We need better skills and capability. Step into that and showcase what you can do and how you can do that.
And what do you think the kind of the longer term prognosis for L&D is? Where do you see us going forward? Because I would love for it to be more aligned commercially with the way that you do things. What are your kind of predictions kind of outside the immediate kind of COVID situation?
Yeah, look, we will get past this, won't we? In whatever guise, right? We will get past this, and there will be a new environment for us to operate in the foreseeable future. I suppose my guess on what does that mean for us as a profession, I think I'm always going to say it, technologically we've got to be at the forefront, because obviously now more than ever, that's just had a great live example of how these things can work to a degree. Big caveat there, can work. I think I got lots of questions, right, around how do you go and find out what's going on, what's working. How do you walk a mile in their shoes if you can't, and we have to maintain some sort of distance, etc., etc., etc. We have to be a function, and can be a function, that can drive transformation and change. And you know, sadly, because of some of the outcomes, that's sad for the impact on death and what that's meant for families and people, etc. As a profession, what a great opportunity to really help energize, reskill, motivate, engage, utilize all these people that can and continue to work for those companies.
I love this kind of analogy of you poking and prodding. And, you know, Simon, thank you just so much for sharing with us today.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for the time.
Do your meetings and events leave you feeling inspired and energized? They should do. Too often, though, they are dominated by one person, they're frustrating, you wonder why you're there. Discover liberating structures. These are more than 33 different methods that involve everybody and are focused on the end result. We teach a 1-day introduction and a 2-day immersion workshop in which you'll get to experience over half of those structures. If you want to change the nature of the way your organisation runs meetings, this could be for you.
Studies have shown that learning programs are now crucial weapons in the fight to attract and retain talent. Working closely with modern learning organisations across the globe, we have developed Learning Programs of Excellence, a prestigious award recognising exceptional, state-of-the-art learning programs. If you're a learning department or function, LPE will help you attract new talent. You'll boost your appeal as an employer by showcasing the calibre of your learning programs and development opportunities within your organisation. If you're a provider of learning, LPE gives you an absolute guarantee that your learning programs are capable of creating a lasting positive effect on performance and business outcomes. Get in touch with the Learning and Performance Institute now and begin your learning program of excellence journey.
Well, that's the end of another show. So I really hope you enjoyed it. Not only enjoyed it, but found it useful and took away things that you can think about, things that you can implement. And Kate, have you been grappling with online programs? Have you found anything for us?
Yes, well, as we've mentioned the last couple of episodes, we've got the L&D conference, which starts online on the 22nd of June. Bit of a different vibe. It runs over 6 weeks, lots of asynchronous sessions, really interesting. So check that out. And also delighted to say that the Learning Technology Summer Forum is going online. It should have been last week, but obviously with the pandemic situation, they're taking it online from between the 13th and the 17th of July.
Right. Thanks very much, Kate. Thank you for that. And if you've got any events that you'd like us to publicize, the next program is on the 25th of June. If you want anything to go out, just email us to the address on the screen. And Kate, what about today's program? I thought there were some very, very interesting interviews. What struck you? What was your highlight today?
I just feel so lucky to get to talk to some of the people that we get to talk to. So, I mean, Simon Gibson, I've known for a long time. I think the way he cuts through to the business problem, he doesn't get distracted by the tech or, you know, any of the kind of noise. He just really, really aligns himself with what stakeholders in a business want. And I think that everyone watching this can take something away from that. And then Dr. Hannah Gore, I think her take on design, doing something different. You know, it isn't just about content. It's about, you know, learning in practice and applying what you've learned, and that kind of flipped approach that she does. I just think she's got so much value to add as well. And again, I think almost anyone watching this program can just take away some nuggets of that and see how they can play with what they're doing with the design.
Yeah, I agree with you. And there are two really important points. One is follow the business. And secondly, make design, tell your story. Don't make design a thing in itself, just over design and over elaborate. And I had a really good conversation with Serena Gonzalez-Fish as well. Serena's doing a doctorate at Middlesex University. And people like Serena, I think, are really important for our industry. People are willing to challenge the fundamentals and back up what they're seeing and what they're reading by good, solid research evidence. She's been talking to about 20 or 30 leading L&D practitioners, theorists, gurus from all around the world. And she's getting some very, very helpful data and insights, which will eventually materialize in her doctorate. So we need people like her, just as we need people like the head of L&D for Shelter. You know, someone who is trying to really help that organization achieve its aims and objectives, not just put out a portfolio of courses, which is probably the least appropriate thing to be doing at this stage. So good people doing good work, and we'll continue to celebrate that. And as I said, our next program is on June the 25th, and we'll be there. I hope you will be.